ISO 27001 is the internationally leading standard for information security management systems, or ISMS for short. What exactly does that mean? A standard describes everything that is required to operate an effective information security management system. This means it covers company processes, especially those related to information security, as well as personnel, organizations, and of course, IT security, that is, the technology. In addition to ISO 27001, of course, there are other ISMS standards, frameworks, and norms that you can follow. But if you follow this standard, there are several advantages. It is internationally recognized, meaning it is known worldwide. Other standards, for example, are only known in certain industries or parts of the world, so to speak. And especially ISO 27001 is essentially this international standard. What is the goal behind it? There are three so-called protection objectives. One is confidentiality, which is the one most people are familiar with. For example, the company data I have should of course be treated confidentially, should only be known within my company, and only what I really want to publish should be made public. That means explicit attention is paid to this. The second is integrity, which means I can rely on the fact that the data I store and have access to remains unchanged from when I originally saved it. This means that there has been no manipulation or any kind of defect that could have altered anything. And thirdly, it's the availability of information, meaning I have access to all the services I use internally. Or for example, if I offer services to customers, such as providing an online service, a website, or an online portal, that these are always available whenever my customers need them. If you look at this standard, there is Annex A. There, everything is really laid out in tabular form. The requirements of this standard are described. That's what makes it special. That means the standard defines requirements. For example, I have to ensure appropriate awareness among my employees regarding information security. That's one requirement out of nearly 100. The standard is internationally recognized and applicable because it sets out these requirements but leaves open how exactly I have to implement them. That means I can decide for myself what is an effective method to fulfill these requirements. And of course, that applies to everyone. And I can also say, for example, that there are requirements in software development as well. And if, as a company, I say that I don't do any software development at all, not even internally, then, for example, this requirement or the related requirements do not apply to me. And I could state that accordingly as well. Okay, so I've basically fulfilled all the requirements except for those I don't have to deal with because they're not applicable to me. If I have implemented all the requirements of ISO 27001, I can also optionally undergo certification. That means you can imagine it like this. An external service provider, an external auditor, comes in and independently checks my company against the standard to see whether I have fulfilled everything required by that standard. My task as a company is then, or rather, the role of the information security officer is then to present to the auditor exactly how these requirements have been implemented. And the auditor looks at whether, in their opinion, everything is appropriate according to the required standard, or if something might still be missing. If something is missing, it's not a big deal. That means you also have a certain amount of time to make improvements. And once you have fulfilled everything, you receive the ISO 27001 certificate. With this certificate, I then have a corresponding trust advantage in the market. That means I can present this to my customers accordingly. I have proven this with a certificate. I have taken care of all the requirements for proper information security, and this has also been confirmed by an external auditor. The certificate is valid for 3 years, but I also have to conduct so-called surveillance audits in between, or if there are major changes, such as which data I process, which processes I use, etc. This means that once a year, an auditor would come again in a shortened form to check the company and see whether everything is still implemented according to the standard or if any changes have occurred, which might mean that I am no longer compliant with this standard. Another advantage is that I can, of course, protect myself against risks. That means a major component of ISO 27001 is also risk management. As a company, I therefore have to think in advance about which risks could affect me, which damage scenarios, as they say, could occur, and also with what probability. For example, it could be a power outage or a hacker attack, etc. That means I have to consider in advance what steps I would take accordingly if, let's say, the worst happens. What would that mean for my company? And what could I already say in advance that I could do about it? Or of course, I can also say to a certain extent, I accept this risk. That means I am aware that a risk exists there, but I do not want to take any measures against it or as a precaution, because in this particular case, for example, those measures would be more expensive than the potential damage scenario that could occur. ISO Demo 2001 is therefore not just a paper graveyard or some standard that I work through once. Rather, it is an ongoing system, just like any ISMS system always is. That means I have to check every day. Are there new threats that could affect me? Is everything still being implemented as it should be? And yes, it protects me in the long term and also makes my company appear more trustworthy.